Can't get enough of Team Pete? Well, you've come to the right place, as each week I interview supporters of Pete Buttigieg, former candidate for President of the United States and current Secretary of Transportation. Hear their personal stories about why they became part of Team Pete and how they started a movement. Join us as we talk Pete, politics, and anything in between. Hi, everyone. My name is Kim Ang, and I am the host of this podcast, Talking with Team Pete. And today, my guest is Bill Bagnall. Hi, Bill.
Hi.
Thank you for joining me today. How about you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got started with Team Pete?
Sure. I think like a lot of people, my story is very similar in that I'd never pictured myself ever doing anything that I did do during the campaign. And it was, like many of us, I think our stories are similar in that a friend sent me a link to Pete's CNN town hall. And then I went and got his book, and the rest was history. And we studied up on Pete and really liked everything. I felt like it was the first time I had seen a candidate really speak for me in the way I approach things and the way I look at things. And one day on Facebook, somebody here in Portland, Oregon, someone said, "Hey, I really like this Pete guy. Can we, maybe all get together?" And it started there, where I would never, ever just go for somebody's house randomly from Facebook. But there I was in somebody's house in Portland talking about Pete. And from that discussion, we formed a group called PDX for Pete. And for those that don't know, because we did get this question, PDX is the airport code for Portland. And everybody here knows it as the shorthand. And we just kind of got started from there. So
were you looking at other candidates during this election cycle, or did you just kind of fell in love with Pete as soon as you heard about him? And
that's a good question. Well, I would say of the candidates that had announced or that I knew were running at the time, the one that I had voted for twice was Kamala Harris. And in California, I voted for her, and I lived there as a senator and attorney general, and then a senator. And so I would say that Kamala was probably the candidate I probably felt most aligned to. But at that point, I really hadn't nailed it down. I think like a lot of people, we were still kind of seeing who was going to jump in still. But I would say Kamala, maybe Cory Booker, who I'm always rooting for. I really like Cory Booker, and so I'd say those were the two. But it wasn't easy to get to Pete.
Now, once you started meeting with these people from the Facebook group, what did you guys do in terms of your volunteering stuff?
Sure. Well, one thing to keep in mind is Portland, or Oregon, I should say, is very tail end of the election cycle. So we knew we weren't a leading state. So what we decided to do was do awareness building. And so, there was no rules for this. There was no handbook, no guidelines. None of us had ever done this before. I am a partner in an ad agency. And so it was easy for me to get materials produced. And we literally produced these freestanding banners that had Pete's picture and PDX for Pete, our logo. And we would go to farmers markets every weekend. And we just realized that was a really good opportunity to talk to people, just to be there, not necessarily, nothing hard sell. It was very just conversational. And so many people, were intrigued by Pete and interested. And what was very interesting, I've been doing it for almost 9 months, I think. Farmers markets, people go to them pretty regularly. If you go to farmers market, you probably go pretty regularly. So we literally had people who had no idea who Pete was, let's say, in March or April. And by September, October, we're his biggest fans. So it was really nice to see firsthand that evolution of of how he grew his name awareness and how people really came to follow him. But we went to events, we went to Pride events, we went to parades, we went to Democratic events, parades during the summer, a lot of farmers markets. We started out our very first week, because again, we had no idea what we were doing. We were a little shy, we were a little timid. So we thought we went to an Episcopalian church here in Portland and waited outside with our banner and his picture, and thought that would be a gentle crowd, a gentle group to start. And it was great because they were, being that he was Episcopalian, they were more familiar with him, and it was a very gentle way to start advocacy. But we would hand out buttons. We had swag, we had buttons, we had bumper stickers and things like that. But as you know, the beauty was the campaign put out a toolkit so we could create materials, create things that were, using the colors and the logo and all of that, and made it really easy for us.
So how big was your group? Was it like half a dozen people?
Oh,
a dozen?
No, by the time we have, let's just say this. We have a mailing list still because we do keep in touch and so on. And I think there's now something like 500, 600 names that are still in touch with us. So, and that could have just been people that signed on at one event or people that came regularly to help us. We would have Pete-ups regularly at bars and restaurants throughout the campaign. And so we could get anywhere from upwards of 50 or 60 people to come to a Pete-up, and debate watch parties, all of that.
Oh,
so
wow.
It was a really great, and it still is a really great community. And I think that is really one of the lovely takeaways from this whole process has been the friends that we've made and the connections that we've made. And I think many of us, as you are well aware of the Team Pete community today, is bigger than ever. More and more fans join every day, but we're all still connected. And everybody, after Pete stepped aside and got behind Joe, we became PDX for Pete and Joe, and really just got behind Joe and did everything we could to turn out the vote here in Oregon.
I completely agree with you about the whole community part, because I feel like that is the biggest takeaway for me as well, is the people that I've met through the volunteering and stuff, and we're still keeping in touch with each other, across the country or even locally. It's just so nice, and there's this, and I keep saying this, but there's this really great sense of family when you're with these people, and it's like it's your tribe. And there's nothing greater than just being surrounded by people, like-minded people who really are focused on helping this amazing man be the leader of this country, and we all had a common goal, and everybody worked towards that, worked so hard towards that, and it's and I did some of the farmers market stuff too, and it was scary, and being an introvert, it's really hard to put yourself out there, but it seems like everybody who is introverted was somehow inspired by him to go out beyond their comfort zone and just do it, and I just love that part about him.
I would agree. One of the things, I always say, every day I was like, okay, I still can't believe I'm doing this, like many of us, I have a full-time job, I'm busy and so on. But we always found time to do this. And so as we got started, I wouldn't say we were the first group, but we were one of the early groups, and certainly one of the early groups to do like a freestanding banner. It was like 6 feet tall, lightweight, easy to pop up and easy to take to events. As people on social media started seeing it, other groups across the country reached out to us and asked us, how could we get a banner like that, and how could we
Mm-hmm.
get signage? So well, my partner in my business here was like, oh, we'll do the graphics for them. We can get them printed for them.
Oh,
So
nice.
our banner style, our banner format was literally in 20 or 30 different cities across the country,
Oh,
from
wow.
Rochester, New York, to
Nice.
Maryland,
Uh-huh.
to up in Seattle, Los Angeles. And it was just fantastic. It was just beautiful to
Mm-hmm.
see it. And like you said, all of us are introverts. None of us do this regularly. None of us could picture ourselves doing this.
Right.
But it was great to see. And people, once they got their banner, I think it's so funny. The takeaway for me was that banner gave you something to stand next to. So you
Mm-hmm.
went from being this weird person just standing there to being this official person standing next to an official banner.
Uh-huh.
And so the takeaway was that piece of infrastructure, that piece of campaign infrastructure, once they had that in their hands, they were off.
Yeah.
They were at fairs, they were at farmers markets, they were at pride events, they were at local parades.
Mm-hmm.
Those banners were going everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
and I loved that. And so that was one of the things that I just took away. Somewhere I just moved, but somewhere I have my banner still.
Well, you
I'm
have
not
to
getting
save
rid
it
of
for
that.
next time.
Right, I'm ready. We're ready. Once you
Right,
put the
right.
bat signal up, we're ready.
Yeah. So, what do you think causes that in people to have that confidence? We're all introverts. We don't do this often. So, just standing next to this banner, like you say, I mean, what is it that makes people just go out and talk to others that they're not usually comfortable doing? Is it just because they believe in him so much and what he stands for and just want to kind of, introduce people to him?
So I think Pete made it. I think I don't know. I can't speak for anybody else, but for myself, I would say Pete made it easy for us because he articulated things in ways that most of us had never said, never heard. The way he spoke to common sense issues, whether the topic be complex or simple,
Right.
was something that I think resonated with so many people. One of the fantastic things in working for Pete I found was, Portland is a more liberal city. Oregon is a blue state, but I'd say light blue.
Yeah.
It has a much like California. California, where you have your two cities, your
Right.
two main cities, and then you have the center of the state and the east, and
Right.
very conservative. Oregon
Right.
is very much like that, just more compact. But we would have Republicans coming up to us and talk to us about Pete that really liked him, and he was the one Democrat that they could see themselves voting for. Oddly enough, too, what I found were a fair number of libertarians that were comfortable with Pete in his policies, and I think that made it easy. If it was a more, what's the word I want, a more strident candidate, a more divisive candidate, it would not be so easy
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
be speaking. But I think Pete brings out the best in us, and I think he brings out the best in this country.
Yeah.
And I always say that Pete, I think, is one of the few people that walk on this earth that might even be better than we think he is. We think
Yeah.
he's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
We're seeing every day that I think he might even be better than we think he is.
Yeah. I completely agree. There's certain gifts within him that just shine every single time we hear him, right? Or the things that he does, you just realize, wow, this guy is just really the whole package. And those of us who jumped on board at the beginning saw that right away in him. Yeah.
It's interesting to see. I think one of the things he said, and I'm sure I'm not saying it correctly, but he talked about early on that we're all baskets of good and bad, and good and evil. And the idea is to bring out the good or speak to the good in people. You know, speaking of the PDX or Pete group, so some of us barnstormed in different states because, again, Oregon is at the end of the run. And so a bunch of us went to Iowa for the LJ, Liberty and Justice Dinner in October. I think it was October of 2019. And so we went and canvassed on doors in Iowa. The campaign put us to work. And getting to talk to Iowans about Pete was fascinating. Was an experience that I am so glad that I did. Again, the idea of like spending my own money, you know, getting on a plane, flying to Iowa. I'd never been to Iowa before, and spending a week there. But I did it with friends from PDX or Pete, a big group of us, and obviously, you know, hundreds of other people from Pete supporters from all across the country. And it was fascinating to hear from Iowans what they thought of Pete. They really liked Pete. They were big fans of Pete. They were just conflicted. They just didn't know, because they saw the importance of this election and beating Donald Trump, and that was their concern, was could he beat Donald Trump? But they liked him so much. We even had a woman come up to us after the LJ dinner that night, the big, you know, speeches and everything. She came up, and she was an Iowan, and she grabbed my shoulders and she just looked me in the eye, because we had all of our Pete swag on, and she said, Pete's going to win Iowa. I can feel it in my bones. So it was just a fantastic experience. And then some of us went to New Hampshire. Some of us went to South Carolina. I went with some of people to Nevada in February to, again, knock on doors and get to participate there. Nevada is a caucus state. And so I got to attend my first caucuses, which was unlike anything I've ever seen before. Not sure how that all is superior to other voting methods, but it was fascinating to watch.
Yeah. Was it similar to the Iowa caucus?
Yeah, it's pretty similar from what I understand. It's pretty similar. I wasn't in Iowa for their caucuses, but from what I understand, yeah, you know, you meet at a place. It was on a Saturday morning. You have, you know, where you go, schools and, you know, halls and things like that. And it was interesting. It's fascinating to see. I am very pleased to say that in the 5 caucus districts or whatever that we worked in, Pete won all of them. Bernie Sanders was a close second. And so it was a little hard for us to calibrate how that day was going to go, because we had won all of ours. So we kind of went into it like, oh my gosh. Well, Bernie did really well downtown where the unions were. And I think that ended up, you know, beating both Joe and Pete. But it was a fantastic experience. Once again, I'm like, and you know what? Like all of us, I think, I'm ready to do it again. He puts out the signal, and we'll do it again.
Yeah, no, I completely concur about that. So what was your favorite part about canvassing and knocking on doors?
Getting to hear people's concerns, especially in Iowa. You know, I was fascinated by how many people actually opened the door. And, you know, in Iowa, in Iowa, it was fall. It was Halloween week. And in Iowa, you know, if you're familiar with it, opening the door in Iowa is a 2-part process. There is a door, and then there is a storm door. Oh. And so they have to not only open their door, but they also open their storm door. And coming from California originally and now in Oregon, I don't know that I would. You know, I'd be like, what do you want? You know, right. But these folks opened their door, and I think they wanted to talk to us. And our objective was to get them to sign a commit to caucus card. So they commit, we get their card so that we follow up with them, or somebody, you know, a campaign follows up with them as it gets closer to caucus day. And we got a lot of those signed, but had a lot of really good conversations with people about what their concerns were. And I enjoyed knowing as much as I did then about Pete and his platform and his policies. And it made it really interesting conversations. And I'm very appreciative of that. I took away from it that people that are dedicated to a candidate, that see themselves in a candidate or see what could be in a candidate, makes all the difference. And I think that inspirational part of it can't be overlooked. And to this day, I mean, you see it all the time, how Team Pete stands up and amplifies and speaks out. We try to stay with the rules of the road. Sometimes we're rules of the road adjacent, but we stay within our lane, so to speak. And I think it's been fascinating for me now to see especially on Twitter, I guess, where you can see this in real time, how many people are like, I really slept on Pete Buttigieg in the primaries. I wasn't a fan. I didn't follow this, but boy, man, now he is the man. He is the guy. He's just doing it. And now, I think to come back to your question about takeaway, I think that sense of community. I think you may know through our mutual friends that we started another group called Build the Era, and so I get to continue the work, working with amazing people and that are really advocating for building our next generation.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I've heard about Build the Era, so I didn't realize that you were part of that too. That's great.
It's
great.
It's a fantastic group of mostly Pete volunteers, but then some other people have come along now from other campaigns and joined us. And our mission is we're all volunteer. We have members in all 50 states plus Puerto Rico and DC, and I think 7 or 8 foreign countries now.
Nice.
We have that, and our mission is to educate people on the role of the U.S. Department of Transportation. And our goal is to educate people about what USDOT does and doesn't do. And could we have picked a better time to advocate for something that has become front and center now to Joe Biden's success with the infrastructure bill and Build Back Better, and then Pete being out every day. Today, as we're speaking, he's in the midst of a 5-day tour across, I think, 6 states, announcing raise grants. And raise grants, and I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they're basically a competitive grant. In other words, states or communities or cities put forth a proposal, and they have to, really present it with a lot of good detail, how it's going to help a community rebuild, be equitable, can reconnect communities, and make for a safer environment for everyone who moves. We think of cars, but really we should be thinking about pedestrians and bicyclists and those that are using mobility devices. And do they feel safe? Do they feel empowered using roads and streets and things like that? And the raise grants, those that have won them, are doing amazing work. And Pete is touting those. And so we are amplifying those as well as part of what we do. But we have speakers every month. We host virtual happy hours on a variety of topics related to mobility and transportation and things. And I'm not going to lie. I mean, none of us knew much about USDOT, before Pete got there. But, we were saying earlier that, and this is part of why I think Pete may be even better than we think, is because USDOT is now excelling in so many ways with the data. Pete, as you know, is very data-driven. He loves dashboards. He likes getting data together, both for them to use, but also for the public to see. And you're already seeing that now. And you're seeing a dashboard rolling out, I think, in September on U.S. airlines and performance and refunds for bad service, canceled flights, things like that. some people are excited. Some people are begrudgingly admitting that Pete is really affecting change in a mammoth department that touches, as you know, everything, the way anything moves, anyone moves, anything moves, is part of USDOT. So it's fun. We are having a great time learning, connecting with people, and we have a mascot, Rhonda.
You have a mascot?
We have a mascot. I think I've got
a mascot named Rhonda?
Rhonda, as in roundabouts. Because one of the things that we advocate for, roundabouts is a great investment. In fact, Pete is touting I believe it's in Ohio, where 6 new roundabouts are going in. One of the things that we won't turn this into a roundabouts podcast, but roundabouts offer a lot of good reasons to exist, including they are greener because people aren't idling, they're moving, they're not sitting there idling. They are resilient because they don't have any traffic lights, so if power goes down, they still work. They are more attractive than a traditional 4-way intersection. And once people use them a few times, they really like them and they get in the groove of how they work.
I do like roundabouts. I love those.
Yeah.
Every now and then I'll come across one and it's like, oh, this is nice. I don't have to stop and wait.
Right, exactly. So, and I think there are studies that show that once they're implemented, because some people are like, oh no, I don't like them, they scare me. Once they use them a couple times, they figure it out. So one of the areas that we are working on is education about roundabouts, how you cross them, how you interact with them as a pedestrian or something like that. And that's one of our roles, is educating people. Last week, I am constantly learning in this, and I think that's what I love. I think we all know Pete's pretty smart, and he's always learning. And working at Build the Era has been fascinating for me because I'm learning so much. And there's a man here in Portland, Oregon, who leads something called a bike bus. Have you ever heard of a bike bus? There had I. What's a bike bus? Bike bus is essentially a method of kids or people riding together on their bikes, like a bus would. So you have a starting point, and a bunch of people meet there, and then let's say they're going to ride from one point to school. Okay, and so the bus goes along a street, and as you get to other streets, people join. They get on the bus, if you will, from their homes.
Get on the bus with their bikes?
No. The bus is them riding their bikes.
Oh, okay.
So imagine 100 kids riding to school on a predetermined street, predetermined route, so that they're safely riding together, together to school. So there's safety in numbers. There's a pre-planned route.
Okay.
And depending on where you live, you get on the bus from your street and then join up with the other kids, and they all end up at school together. So they are cutting down on emissions. They are avoiding that bike car drop-off thing at school. They are getting parents involved, because some parents will ride along to help sort of chaperone them all together. Because you could get 150 kids on some days riding their bikes. Not to mention you're getting kids physically active.
Right.
And you're getting kids to understand how roads work, how intersections work, how to be communicating and fun with each other. There's no downside to this. And this is something, so last week in our happy hour, a couple of weeks ago, we had Coach Balto here in Oregon talk about that. And so now the beauty of this is we had 40 or 50 people attending from across the country, this happy hour. So now he's connected with all of these people in different states that want to start a bike bus in their neighborhood and learn how to do it. That, at the end of the day, I feel really great about it. I know that all my colleagues here at Build the Era feel great about it as well.
Yeah. Oh,
And a
that is
nice
so.
side effect is that Pete's team, his communications team, all of his press people, his coordinators and everything, they follow us and interact with us on Twitter now.
Oh, really?
So
Oh,
we know that
nice.
Pete is seeing this, and
Oh, nice.
we're it's a way for us to continue to be involved in the advocacy that Pete is doing, and
Yeah.
that's how we got here.
That's quite an ingenious idea, actually. So I'm glad that they're connecting with you guys and figuring out different ideas for different communities to try to
Yeah,
do the same. That's great.
yeah.
Ah,
And so many of the issues of equity, and connection, and building
right,
community that Pete talked about in his campaign,
right.
they transfer to the work of USDOT and what's
Yeah.
happening now, beautifully. I've really become much more sensitive to bike riders and pedestrians and those that are using mobility devices. And if you start even peripherally being involved, like I am, you start to see poor intersections, sidewalks that don't go anywhere, ramps that just lead into a wall. I mean, it's unbelievable how much poor infrastructure there is, and that really inhibits people. And if someone isn't comfortable or confident to leave their home, then they're not free to live the life of their choosing.
Yeah, yeah.
And you remember that Pete talked about that in his campaign, that's the goal of good governments, is to let people live the life of their choosing.
Right. And making it easier for them to live that life. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things that I thought when I first heard he was nominated for this job was, why? But then I realized Biden's campaign promise was the whole infrastructure, rebuilding. And now that Pete is in the forefront of all this, I couldn't think of any better person for this job than him, because he is such a visionary thinker, and so all these things that he's trying to do with infrastructure has been amazing. And I spoke with Jeannie Akutanza.
Oh yeah,
yeah. So she was telling,
she was one of our founding board members.
Yeah. So she was telling me about how he's been streamlining, all these ways in which, like the grants that you were talking about, and how to make it much easier for communities to apply for them. And so just making things easier for people rather than harder is the whole point of government. And I feel like, he's the right person for this job. So,
you touched on it, and Jeannie, I know she educated me on this point. It's not enough to make them available, these grants and so on. Small cities, tribes, reservations, they don't have a grant writer. They don't have someone on staff that is just applying for grants and dollars. So Pete has made sure they're offering the training and the resources to make it easier to apply. And so the other advantage of this program, these competitive grants, which Pete is a huge fan of, apparently he used them in South Bend as well for various programs, was that even if you don't get awarded one, you're going to learn from the experience, and you're going to share your information. Everyone who applies, everyone who submits an application agrees to share their information with other cities. And so they're all learning from each other, and they're all like, oh, wow, that's a really great way. Bus systems, transport systems, how they're, one of the issues that we have in Oregon is that we have a lot of train and traffic interruption. So you have freight lines that are going through major roads. How do we change that so that the freight can still keep moving, but so can the people? And that's what some of the issues that they're dealing with. But as Jeannie said, they're making it much easier for cities to interact with and communicate with USDOT. Because I think, at the end of the day, mayors just get it. Yeah. Mayors get it. Mayors, as you've heard, and other mayors have now said, mayors have to fill the potholes. Mayors
Yeah.
have to make sure that, when you turn that tap on, that water comes out of the pipe. Unlike most other elected representatives who are not responsible directly to their citizens.
Right.
I think that's a great perspective, that Pete has.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that was the other thing I thought of too, is that his role as a mayor, and he understands how things like infrastructure and transportation affect his community. And so I think he's more mindful of that and in granting these fundings to local cities and stuff. So,
Exactly.
Yeah. So in all of your volunteering, did you get a chance to meet Pete in person and shake his hand or anything?
I did. I got to meet, so in Nevada, we got to meet, and I have when I went to Nevada, actually I went to Nevada a couple times. Once was for the week leading up to their elections, to their caucuses and canvassing. But I went earlier to open up their new campaign office in Reno, and drove to Reno and there for the opening, did a little volunteer work, brought my dog, and he got to go, and we got to meet Pete. Pete talked to Sparky, my dog, and we got photos with him, and he was and this is the thing too. He also met with us afterwards as a group of volunteers to take photos with us. He is as gracious and as everyone says, and each person watching him talk with people, he talks to that person like they're the only person in the room. It's not that typical politician, that shakes your hand but is looking over your shoulder to the next person. He's making eye contact with you. He's listening. It is a gift that he has. And it's those little things, I think, I don't want to say that I wanted to poke holes in Pete and prove that he wasn't the person that we thought he was. But each opportunity, whether it's his response to a situation, seeing him in person, just like, no, he's as great as we think he is. He's as smart as we think he is. He is as compassionate as we think he is. In Nevada, when I saw him speak at Reno, it was the time that the lights went out in the gym. Power got cut while he was speaking. And to see his calm reaction, we're all in darkness suddenly, to see his sense of humor, to see his ability to, yell, put his voice out loudly for the whole gym to hear during something like that. It's like, wow, that's the kind of person I want in charge. I think, I don't know about you, but when I look at candidates for, a variety of things, but certainly president, I want someone who is smarter than me. Now, that is not a high, I will say, that is not a high bar to raise, but I want that person that is smarter than me. I want the smartest person in the room to be in charge.
Yes.
And I think that Pete is proving once and again, every day, day in, day out, that he is not only the smartest person in the room, but also perhaps the most engaged person. He's listening. He reads the room. I mean, you see him flying all over the country. He's flying coach. He's gotten flights bumped, just like everybody else. He's not flying first class. He's not flying charter. He is seeing the world the way all of us see it. And I just think that is so important. It's so, and Midwest roots. He and Chasten and kids. I mean, they're parents, they're citizens, they're millennial. They're all of that. Generational change. And I'm excited when I see Pete and Chasten. I'm excited for the future, and I intend to see the day where he is the president of the United States, if that is what he wants to do.
I think we can try to get him there.
I think so too. I think so too. I think there's a lot
Yeah.
of good that needs to happen. A lot of, and I think maybe people
Yeah.
are experiencing good government.
Yeah.
I
What
think
good
it's
government
beyond.
can do for us, right? They're
I
actually
think
seeing it happen.
we're
Yeah.
actually seeing it happen, and perhaps even more so than the previous administrations of memory for a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people. I think
Mm-hmm.
in some ways they're seeing government deliver
Yeah.
quickly, being nimble, being responsive in ways that we haven't seen in years and years, even just beyond the former guy.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue that in some ways, certainly was much better before him, but I think we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing delivery of things better than we have ever seen. And
Mm-hmm.
people, I mean, we've been through a heck of a 2 or 3 years now
Mm-hmm.
on a multitude of levels, from a
Yes.
pandemic to international crises to
Mm-hmm.
political division to
Mm-hmm.
all of that. And I think that, once again, that's where Pete comes in because,
Yeah.
the ability to transcend political lines. Going back to we were talking about Pete and what made it so easy. One of the things that also made it easy and opened a lot of eyes, or opened up a lot of channels for communication, was his being a veteran.
Mm-hmm.
His serving
Mm-hmm.
is the number one issue for I'd say a decent chunk of voters.
Mm.
That is very important, and the fact that he served,
Mm.
that he volunteered
Yeah.
and served,
Mm-hmm.
really opened the doors. And that's why I say,
Mm.
Veterans for Pete and a lot of those groups
Mm.
that really stood up for him, that really fought for him. I was very proud
Mm.
to join forces. So we're joining forces with groups that, would
Yeah.
seem not to have anything in common.
Right.
But that candidate is what brought those people together. Republicans for Pete,
Mm-hmm.
Libertarians for Pete.
Mm-hmm.
He went beyond the groups that you would think. It wasn't just
Mm-hmm.
I'm a member of the LGBTQ community.
Mm-hmm.
I do not want to see someone who becomes president simply because they are a member of the LGBTQ community any
Yes.
more than I want to see any other demographic aspect as to be the why you're the president or why you're the leader.
Right.
But to
Right.
see so many groups, especially veterans, support him so actively made me very proud, made me very happy.
Mm.
I would say groups that, I won't name any names, but several of the leading LGBTQ organizations did not support him or
Mm.
let him hang out there by himself until there was a nominee. And I was disappointed in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was disappointed in that during the campaign. But
Yeah, I mean, it's important to have that representation, right? I mean, how did that make you feel that there's this gay candidate that I mean, it's not just the fact that he's gay, because when I look at Pete, yeah, he's gay, but there's much more to him. I mean, he's intelligent, he's kind, he's gracious, all those things that you've talked about. But it's like when you look at him, he makes you, like, all those things kind of dwindle away about his sexuality, right? Because all you see is this brilliant, amazing guy who can lead this country and do so much for this country. But yeah, I mean, I did read some of those articles where they were saying, well, he's not gay enough, or, what's he doing? I mean, that to me is just insane. Insane.
Well, I will tell you this. I would argue that Pete did more to advance the acceptance of gay and lesbian, or the adult community, than maybe anyone has in history. And I don't mean that in deference to the other leaders, the shoulders that he is standing on, because he would be the first to say that. But what I mean by that was, for a lot of people, it was their first time really seeing a gay couple.
Yeah.
I'm speaking to Republicans, very conservative people, that it was their first time. And Pete, as you said, didn't make an issue of it. He wasn't presenting himself as the gay candidate.
Right.
He's not going to be, as he said, the president of gay America. He was running to be president of America, the United States. And it he made it so that his relationship status, his sexual status was irrelevant to a lot of people. He made it normal. He made it secondary. And that's why I say, as a gay man, I am very proud of him for what he has done for our community. Whether those in our community will acknowledge it or not, I get frustrated. Pete doesn't get frustrated by those things. I don't think he looks at it that way, so I shouldn't either. But he has opened the door for a lot of people as the most successful gay presidential candidate in history, as the first Senate-confirmed gay secretary in America. He has quietly changed a lot of minds, and he has made something that some people may have had issues with completely irrelevant. And you see them now with the kids. People are excited for them. They're they're happy to see pictures of the kids, and then they're growing and so on. And that's what it is at the end of the day. And this is what I feel I fall into the category as, there's a lot of extremes with probably any community. There's a lot of extremes. Pete is a dorky, normal guy. I mean, he wears Dockers. He wears, he's very Midwest. I don't want to say Midwest, but he's what we would think of as Midwest. And guess what? Most of the community are dorky guys that wear, polo shirts from Target and Dockers, and that's what most of us are. And Pete spoke to me in that, and that's where I saw myself in him. I'm like, he's just an average guy. He's just Pete is much smarter. He is everything I'm not, but you know what I mean. He's
just a regular guy.
I'm not flamboyant. I'm not out there, and that again is not to speak anything that people that are. Everyone, we need to embrace all of us, but a lot of us are very much like Pete. And we live in neighborhoods. We try to get along. I have Republican neighbors. I have liberal neighbors. And I just want to be part of the community, and that's what Pete showed us, and that's what I continue to do. As I'm sure a lot of people say, be like Pete. You know what I mean, be welcoming, be open. Don't be arguing with people just to argue. Again, as Pete says, when you forget what the point of arguing is. You know what I mean? And so I think it's all good. I spent a great deal of time, a little bit of coin, and a little bit of my introvert coin, and I would spend it all again. I would do it, all of it again, and I just feel like, gosh, we all got better at being citizens because we were involved in Pete's campaign. We all got better at it. We all became engaged. And I see it. I see people continuing to be engaged. Whether it's people like you continuing this conversation in a podcast like this, which I'm so grateful for. People on Twitter that are advocates for Pete, that are bringing the receipts. That, as you see on Twitter, I'm always amazed. Like, how do people do this? They're like right there with responses and information and links and receipts and all that. To the people that are still out there. Getting involved in the cause, because now we've seen even more reason. Women's rights being repealed and stripped away. There's more and more reasons to get engaged. PDX or Pete, what we're doing is we are sharing resources for ways to get involved in campaigns, whether it's here in the state. We have a pretty contested governor's race coming up. But our senators are safe. And so I'm advocating for people to get involved in another race, like in Nevada. I started an Act Blue link for Val Demings, because I want to see her win. I think she would be amazing. And so find ways, it's like in California, your senators are safe. So take some of that time and give it to a state where they need your help.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of organizations out there right now who where they will kind of let you help with all the red states and stuff like that to do
Hmm.
more work like postcard
Hmm.
writing, call banking, and whatnot.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I don't know if you've heard of the documentary Outrage. It came out like in 2004. It was
Hmm.
about this reporter who would try to out these closeted politicians.
Hmm.
And so one of the nice things I love about Pete is the fact that he came out during his mayoral years.
Hmm.
And I feel like that being authentic, being yourself is what makes him so great. And it's just this pure, honest, this is who I am, and it just makes him a better person. Don't you think? I mean, if someone
Oh yeah.
is out, I mean, I'm part of the LGBTQ community as well, and I
Oh.
remember what it felt like to be in the closet, to live a lie, pretending who you're not, and the moment that I was able to have the courage to come out to my family and friends, it changed everything. I mean, the relief, this heavy burden that you carry with you all those years, it just makes you become a better person because you're living your true life. And I don't know about you, like, did you come out when you were in your younger years or
I
later
did.
years?
Yeah, I was pretty young. I mean, not like today I feel like an old man because they were like, kids are coming out at 14 but I was like 22, 23, somewhere around there. I was in college.
Yeah.
And I didn't have, I was very fortunate. I didn't have the family issues and so on that so many people face. But once again, Pete normalizes something even in the way he speaks about it because he did it because not because
Yeah.
it was politically smart, not
Yeah.
because there was any advantage to it, but he wanted to date. He wanted
Right.
to fall in
Right.
love.
Right.
And I'm like, that's such a reason that anyone can, or most people can get behind. And like,
Yeah.
and again, it's such an authentic, honest, kind of nerdy way to explain it. And I think
Yeah.
it's part of what I find endearing about him in his ability to make people comfortable,
Yeah.
to make them feel welcome, to make them feel seen,
Right.
is so important. And I just love the fact that our team, Team Pete, I mean, if any of us start to deviate and kind of go to one extreme, someone will usually sort of tell you, remember, rules of the road, and how we interact with each other, how we interact with others.
Right.
I still have on my Twitter handle, always Team Pete. And there are days where I am not rules of the road, I will say that. But I always keep in mind that, we're representing something bigger. And, we're trying to enhance or advance the dialogue, the communication, the learning with people, and there's so much misinformation. There's so much poor information. There's so much, people out there that are trying to lie, misrepresent information. I think it's important for us to keep putting the information out there. Transportation, equity, all of these issues. They're just part and parcel to who we are, how we move, how we choose to move. As
How
a
we choose to
country.
love, who
How
we
we
love.
choose to love, exactly. And I think like I said, I just feel in so many ways Pete has done something that nobody else has really done, and he has been brave. He's very brave. He and Chasten are both, I think, very brave, and they will have changed lives in ways they will never know. I think what is the saying? Pete is always planting seeds in a garden he may never see. And because he will say he is saving lives. There are kids out there that see themselves in him, that see that, okay, we always say we have that thing, it gets better, right? And so on. And well, I certainly agree. In Pete, he is the personification of that. You can see he came out, it wasn't easy. He's fallen in love. He has a good job. He is giving back. And there are kids out there, you and I know that there are kids out there that see him, and he may be the reason why they keep on keeping on.
Yeah.
And
completely.
Lots of people support us. I mean, I always feel very loved and very supported. But Pete is just transcended that in a way that I think is difficult to articulate, but is impossible not to see.
Yeah.
I love that. I just love that he is doing that for people. And so many Republican, I don't want to generalize, but people that are conservative, Pete always talks about, as you remember the campaign, most people want to be on the right side of history. And we need to do all we can to welcome them and encourage them and bring them over. I now have some more conservative neighbors. I moved out of Portland into the suburbs. And so I definitely have more of a mix of neighbors, retired police and things like that, who have been very welcoming. And, we're initially like, oh, so you two live together. Oh, I see. You can see them doing the math in their head. But I think about Pete because I want to bring these people over to the right side of history and to realize we are just like them. We are weeding our gardens. We are re-roofing our house. We're walking our dog. We're keeping an eye and make sure their garage door is closed at night, texting them if they've left their door open. We really are part of the neighborhood. And I think Pete has really advanced that cause in so many ways. So.
Yeah, because he's just showing us that, that cliche, love is love, right? It's, it just all comes down to us being able to see someone through a different lens, and that lens is just love, right? Because if people can say, well, they find, gay people disgusting or whatever, but it's like, well, but that's not you. So why are you judging them for who they love? I mean, we don't have control over who we love, right? So, but they just happen to see that person through a different lens, than you do. So, love is love.
they oftentimes, as people they're indoctrinated with a belief from their parents or family. Right. But hopefully it goes from gay people are sick or wrong to Bill or Kim is my neighbor. And you become a human. And then that's why I say there's people, they want to be out and proud and loud. And I'm like, I'm all for that. You do you, as they say. But a lot of times I just want people to see me as a human being. Right. And I'm just like that. Right. And so maybe after being neighbors with Kim or Bill or Clayton or Pete or Chaston, they might stand up even, no, they're okay. They're good. They're good people.
They're good people.
They're good people. And that's
exactly
at the end of the day, I'm happy if someone just thinks I'm a decent person, because that's what I'm trying to be. And not always, but I'm trying to be. And we're all in this community together. And that's what Pete, I think, was always, everything from all of his plans. I think that's a common thread that ran through all of them. Public service, community service, the Douglas plan, all of these things were to bring people together and understand and respect our differences, but focus on what connects us.
Right.
And building that bridge, as in Pete's logo, the bridge became a beautiful metaphor for us. That it's like, this is what connects us,
right?
And let's let's understand each other. And I just, in many ways, I think Pete won this campaign. I was not Team Joe in this. You asked earlier at the top of the hour, who I was supporting. I like Joe. I have no issues with Joe. That was not my candidate. That wasn't even in my top three. But now, with the advantage of perspective and looking at it, I think Joe very much might have been just the perfect candidate, the perfect person for this time in history. And to see Pete there with him, and to see Joe giving Pete every opportunity to excel, to work with Vice President Harris, to really be part of a team that is doing so much good. I believe in fate. Sometimes at the end of the day, I'm a believer in fate. Things work out for a reason. You can try to shift and try to alter it a little bit, but ultimately I think things work out for a reason. And I do believe that's the case in the 2020 campaign. I think things worked out. People are exactly where they should be. Right. And Pete's had this opportunity to show so many people what we saw in him. You're all coming to the party late. We were at the party at the beginning, but we're glad you're coming to the party. We're glad to welcome you to Team Pete. We're glad you're here. And Pete is, getting more fans every day. And I love that. In some ways, I feel like I don't have kids, but I feel like this is what a parent must feel like.
Proud.
Very proud, proud, and one, partly, as a parent, I'm sometimes sort of protective. As a parent, sometimes I feel like I'm talking too much about Pete, and at other times I want to make sure people meet him and get connected to him. So that's why I say, in some ways, I have this parental feeling about him, and just I'm just excited. I'm excited to see where the future is going to take him. Yeah, me too. I mean, he's doing extraordinary things right now, and we see that the changes happening at the local level with the communities and stuff. And I heard an interview he did with Trevor Noah recently, and he was talking about going to communities and talking to people. And there's no Republican, Democrat, difference or anything. They're just there. They want things to happen, what's going to work for their community. And there's no red or blue or anything like that. And it just seems like he has that ability to bring people together, and you forget about all these other unnecessary labels that we put on ourselves, and we're just together as people, as a community. And I love what you said earlier about how he makes us better. And I feel like that was one of the things that really struck me about his speech at the end when he conceded. It was politics at its best is great. And, leaders bring out the best in us or the worst in us. And I feel like he brought out the best in all of us. And you can just see it from the way that we interact with each other. And everybody was feeling hopeful and happy and lifting each other up. And I feel like that's what America should be. It's just... That's what we hope.
Yeah. And that's what I hope for. He's the guy who can take us there. And I'm glad that people are finally seeing that, his gift, his ability to do that. So.
I think some people longer than others. Some of us can spot it right away, but I'm just glad they're getting there. Like I said, I'm just glad they're getting there and seeing wow, this guy is as amazing as some people seem to think he is. And, I think that's great. So I'm willing to keep doing the work. And the beautiful part is, like I said before, with the work we're doing with Build the Era, I get to keep learning. I'm learning about something that affects me. I mean, I don't think about it. I've got roads, and I ride a bike, and I drive a car, and I walk, and I fly, and, all of those things. So it's not enough to say, oh, I didn't know what they do. It's like, no, this is important. And one of the things we're getting people to do, too, is advocate for things in their local level. And I think that comes from Pete as well. You've got to speak up and ask for the traffic signal, ask for the safety zone around schools, ask for these things and speak up and go to city council and write to city council and those kind of things. So we have people who do that as well. So I think that's, again, it's something that Pete has taught us.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know that our time is almost up, but I wanted to kind of get your input on what you see as the landscape of our politics come November. Do you see kind of things changing? I feel like things are changing, for sure. Like there's a blue wave coming, I feel like.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to say it's a blue wave as much as low tide, I think, for both parties. I don't know that, it's going to be tough. We still have headwinds. I see the polls where, the generic Democratic congressional candidate is now up 5 or 6 points. It's August. It's August right now. November is a long way away. But what I will say, and what gives me hope, is that unfortunately, because of recent judicial rulings, a large percentage of our population is engaged. Is engaged and enraged.
Yes.
Is how I would say it. And that is going to propel not only for the Senate and things like that, but the local races as well. And so that gives me hope.
Yeah.
And I think, but, I want everyone to get involved. Donate if you can. Donate cash if you can. Donate time. Ask the campaigns what they need. Help, get out there, knock on doors. One of the things that hurt us, I think, in some of the elections during COVID was that Republicans never stopped knocking on doors. And Democrats did, because it was the prudent thing to do. It was the respectful thing to do. I'm certainly hopeful now that, and yet we won. I mean, we won in areas. Joe won, in Georgia and things like that. So I'm hopeful that with us getting back out there, having the conversations with people, I know, it's all social media, it's all TikTok, it's all, podcasts and things like that. But honestly, I do believe that good old-fashioned door knocking, certainly targeted, not just every door, but, those persuadable voters, it's going to be important. And if people are even partially comfortable with it, go out there and do that.
Yeah. Well, let's hope for the best, right?
And let's work for the best. We can do it. And things like this conversation, I think, help. I'm so glad, again, that you're doing that and get people engaged in this topic in whatever way they're comfortable.
Right,
so let's make that change we want to see.
Yeah, exactly, right? Well, thank you, Bill. I so appreciate your time, and this conversation was so great. And I've learned a lot of new things about transportation that I didn't know before.
Be sure to follow us at buildthehero.com to sign up for our newsletter and one of our happy hours. I promise they're fun, they're informative, and they're educational.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you've enjoyed this conversation, please be sure to subscribe so this channel can grow and I'll be able to share more stories with you each week. Thank you for listening.